Well, there's a hotel in North Korea in the capital city of Pyongyang, which is sort of where everything happens. And the name of the hotel is called the Ryugyong, and it's actually the largest, tallest building in all of North Korea. Fun fact, it's 1,080 feet, 105 stories. It's taller than the Eiffel Tower. It's 3 times the size of the Statue of Liberty. In fact, the last 8 floors of the building, they are designed to house 5 different restaurants, and they spin. I don't know why you'd want to eat while you're spinning, but I guess it's like a date night upgrade, especially in a communist country. And so it's actually it's a fascinating building, but it's a huge embarrassment. Coming in currently at $750 million. They started construction in 1987, stopped construction in 1992 because they ran out of money. There was a financial hardship in North Korea, and so they just got this cement structure up. It's really ugly. And then 2 years ago, they started putting the external windows on because I guess of all the global shaming over North Korea. And so they're like, let's get it looking pretty good. So they put these windows on, spent another few $1 million, put the windows on, and admittedly, if you're looking at the picture, it's a beautiful building. But the fun fact is actually the largest building in the world that has yet to have a single occupant, which is a frightening metaphor for us. I mean, a lot of us are coming into the year, maybe coming into the room, and we're spending an enormous amount of time, energy, ego, money on the outside of our life, but we're spending very little time on the inside of our life. In fact, John Ortberg, pastor, author, one of kind of a disciple of one of my favorite authors, a guy named Dallas Willard, but John Ortberg says this: anytime you see life flourishing, it is because it is receiving nourishment from outside of itself. So it should cause us to ask the question, where are we drawing from? Like where are we feasting from that will cause the inward part of our life to flourish? Because make no mistake, everybody here has a very public life. And if you and I do not satisfy and nourish those inward places, those secret places of our soul, then the very public pressure of the life that we live will not be able to bear up under the weight of it, and eventually it will come crashing down. Or let me say this a different way. If you're out to be a hermit and live off the grid, I guess more power to you. I don't recommend that. But all of us are living very public lives. Just think about this. Every one of us, you have a very public job. I mean, unless you work for the CIA or something, or you have very public, you take your kids to very public sports. You have very public vacations. And then if you're tethered to social media, then exponentially more public. And if you and I don't take a significant amount of time nourishing those inward parts of our soul that nourish everything else and hold everything else up, then the very public life that we live, that is inevitable for all of us, it won't bear up under the weight. It will inevitably come crashing down around us. Like I had the privilege of growing up in the last century. The late 1900s, anybody else? Yeah, the golden generation. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, and the privilege of growing up in that time is that we got to be anonymous. Like nobody had to know us, but now everybody knows us. Everybody has access to who you are. And so if I wanted to find my friends or vice versa, I had to get on my Huffy. Right, when I was old enough, got into my 1985 Isuzu Impulse, and I had to drive around Fort Lauderdale looking for my friends, right? So because I didn't know, and they didn't know. But now, today, and this is just a frightening data, if you're a junior high girl on Instagram, which I would not recommend that, but if you're a junior high girl on Instagram and you're posting something, there is now more pressure to get a like or an affirmation or a validation on that one post, than exponentially more pressure than I ever felt until I got an adult job. In fact, our little city, our little town, I consider it sort of a microcosm of New York City. I don't know if you've ever been to New York, but New York has this reputation of taking the most ideal, the most talented, the people that really want to do something with their life. They go to New York to, make a difference, I guess. And New York City is said to just spit those people out, right? Our city is a microcosm of that, and I love our city. But our city, at the very center of its ethos, it's about winning. And especially if you work in the university, or if you're in the athletic department, or you're a professional, and there's this enormous pressure to succeed. Our city's like, you better succeed, you better win, you better bring everything that you are to win. And if you don't win, we're gonna eat up everything that you are, and then we're gonna spit you out. Because it's about winning. And then you're left empty. In fact, sociologists, they know this. They see this trend because all of us now in the last 25 years are living very public lives. And what sociologists say is that the public life that all of us are living has a cycle. And it begins with ambition. Ambition is this idea that we can do something. There is this drive within us to make a difference, to make a mark, and that's part of being human. It's beautiful. But then ambition eventually moves to drive. It's this internal combustion engine inside of us that's gonna it's grit. It's this thing that says, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to succeed, no matter the cost, no matter the energy. I'm gonna put all of that into the outward life. And then inevitably, sociologists, these are not Christians. These are people that are studying human behavior over time. They're saying, and eventually it devolves. That's the language they use. It devolves into exhaustion. And I would imagine, and I don't really have to imagine it, but I would imagine for those of you who don't know, you're coming into the year, coming into this space, and you're already there. You're already in exhaustion. You are so weary. This idea of even making a resolution, you're like, yeah, my resolution, make it another day. Now, I'm not a sociologist, but I am a pastor, and I've been doing this a long time. And if I could add something to that list, is if you and I stay in that season of exhaustion long enough, that season of weariness, where there's nothing left, where whatever we've done, whatever energy we've given to the public life, and they've taken it and not given anything back, you live in that season of exhaustion long enough, inevitably it will move you to an emotional and spiritual death. And yet we don't have to live there. In fact, Jeremiah, the prophet, and I love this so much. If you're new to the Bible, Jeremiah is an Old Testament prophet. He's actually a writing prophet, if you're wondering. He's my favorite writing prophet. And because there's two kinds of prophets. There's like proclaiming prophets, and like Elijah, who's my favorite proclaiming prophet, and then Jeremiah is my favorite writing prophet. But Jeremiah, what he's going to do in the next few minutes is he's going to warn us against trying to nourish ourselves in the wrong place, trying to nourish ourselves from the public space. And again, this is not a warning against the public space. We all have public lives. This is a warning against nourishing ourselves from the public life. And so he says this, Jeremiah 17. This is what the Lord says. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, or in this outer life. Cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh. So what the pressure of public life should do for us as believers, as followers of Jesus, is it should cause us to drive the roots of our life down to where we know there's going to be nourishment. Because over time, if you live in the public life long enough, you're going to get to that place of exhaustion and you go, where am I going to get nourished? And as the believer, we say, okay, it's certainly not in the public life. I'm going to drive my roots down deeper. This is the metaphor of how trees work. Because trees, when they are in a drought season, they actually use all of their nourishment not to grow leaves. They use their nourishment to drive the roots of their tree down even deeper in search of water, in search of nourishment. And so Jeremiah, he continues, he says, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. Now that struck me so much because I realized when you and I stay in a space of exhaustion long enough, When you and I stay in a space of weariness, when we give our best energy to the very seen public places, and that is not an indicator that you're wicked or that you're more sinful. Like we're all sinful, we're all broken terminally. But when you and I live in exhaustion long enough, when we just relent our lives to the idea that I'm just going to be weary my entire life, inevitably your heart will turn from the Lord. That's what he's saying. And he says that person will be like a bush in the wastelands. They will not see prosperity when it comes. Now, why won't they see prosperity? I think the reason they won't see prosperity is because their eyes are so focused on the public life, building up the public life, building up this persona, seeking success, whatever it is. And when God does bring a flourishing, God does bring a kind of soul prosperity into their life and makes it available to them, they don't even see it, and so they just walk right past it. I mean, we've all known people like this, right? That have somehow eluded flourishing, and it may be you in the room, I don't know, but we've all known somebody where they have, in the natural, as it relates to being a human, they have prosperity, meaning they have all the money they've ever wanted. You ever know somebody like that? They have all the money they wanted. They have influence. They have privilege. They have power. It seems like they have everything, but their children hate them. And they're on their fourth marriage and their fifth heart stint, and they're just miserable. And the reason is because true prosperity, true flourishing in the heart of God has eluded them. You can have everything in this world and you can still be miserable. And that's what Jeremiah is saying. He's like, when we give our best to the outward life, real prosperity eludes us. And he goes on, he says this. He says, those kinds of people, they will dwell in the parched places of the desert, in a salt land where no one lives. Now, theologians, they think Jeremiah is referring to a real place. I think he is too. It's this place southwest of the Sea of Galilee. It's arid, it's dry, it's filled with rocks. Nothing grows there. Nothing. Except during the summer rains. And it's, when the summer rains come, it's very, just about a month period of time. And that moment, everything grows up. It's beautiful, and it looks like it's flourishing. And then the summer rains stop, and then everything dries up, the pools dry up, and everything dies, which is the perfect picture of the public life, of giving our energy only to the public life. Meaning, if you only flourish when you have friends, and then those friends are taken away, and then somehow you lose your faith, it's because your faith was in your friends. If you're flourishing because you're healthy and you got a good report at the doctor, and then you get a bad report and things begin to tank in your body, and then you lose your faith, it's because your faith was in your body, was in your health. I see this one all the time when you're in a church and it seems like you're flourishing and everything's going well, and then the pastor resigns or there's a moral failure, and then you lose your faith. It's because your faith was in the guy. Not in Jesus. And so the danger is that you and I only flourish when the summer rains come. When the rains are here, we're good, but there is another option. There is an unseen place in which God promises to nourish us. This is what Jeremiah is going to get at. Now look at verse 7. I hate this mic. He says, but blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought and never fails to bear fruit. Now, scholars, again, think this is a real place. It's west of Jerusalem, and it's a place, I'm going to jack this up, but it's a place called Gen Hashlasha. And translated, it just means garden of the three springs. You can see it's filled with emerald green water. It's supplied by underground springs. It's not sustained by anything outside of itself. It's literally in the middle of the desert. And if a bush begins to grow in the summer rains, outside of Gen Hashlasha, it flourishes, but the moment the rains stop, it dies. If it's planted in Gen Hashlasha, it flourishes all year round. Outside, we die. The inside, we live. And that really is my hope for our house this year, which is why we called you to a fast, and why I'm so encouraged to see so many fasting in our house. But my hope, my prayer for you is that your soul would look like that. Because in spite of whatever pressure of the public life you're facing, and it comes, it's inevitable in our life. In whatever circumstance you're facing, there is the potential of an unseen strength and supply coming from the Word of God and the very Spirit of God flowing like a river into your soul that causes you to flourish. We've all known people like this, right? I mean, there's people like this in our church. I mean, I would call them heroes of the faith. They're the kind of people that everything's shaking around them, and there's a drought all around them, and people are facing that drought, but they seem to be flourishing. And the reason they're flourishing is because there is an unseen, there is a secret river of grace, the power of God through the Spirit, through His Word, flowing into their life that they might flourish. Matthew chapter 6, Jesus calls that the secret place. And we're not going to go there, but I would encourage you to go read that, because Matthew 6, Jesus is talking about when we fast, which we've been doing, when you pray and when you give, do that in the secret. And when you do it in the secret, you'll get a reward. And the reward is His provision. His reward is His supply. His reward is that He's going to draw near to us in ways that He won't draw near when we just satisfy the public pressure. It's in the secret place. And by secret, I know that's a weird word. I want to be careful of that word, because in the 1st and 2nd century, there were these people called the Gnostics, and it really was centered on secret knowledge. You know, if you just know the secret things. And the good thing is, in Jesus, He's made all things available to us. There are no secrets, because you're a son and you're a daughter of God. He makes things plain for us. But there is a secret place, and by secret place, I simply mean no one else is invited but you and God. It's that place where you're like, I'm just going to go there. My kids aren't invited. And some of you moms, like, the secret place right now is the bathroom. You're like, I'm locking the door, and the fingers are on the door, and you're like, I'm in the secret place, get out of here. But we all have to have the secret place, that unseen space where we are just with Him. And we long to be with Him, and there's not a clock on it. I know there's sometimes a clock on it, but we're in there, and we're like, okay, I'm just here to enjoy You. I'm just here, maybe there's going to be some intercession. Maybe there's going to be, I'm going to get after it, and I'm going to ask some things. But mostly the secret place is about me being with Jesus, because I just know when I'm with Jesus, things seem to make sense. And the condemnation that I was feeling coming into the secret place just kind of falls off. And I'm just going to be with Him. And I don't have to say a word sometimes, because He is busy talking. He's busy affirming me as a son and daughter. And I just want to be in that secret place. And the thing is, if you get to the secret place, which is a real place, when you find yourself, when you access that secret place, that time alone with Him, what you can hold on to, the guarantee that you can hold on to, is that your heart is going to be strengthened. And hope is going to be lifted up. And grace is going to cover your sins. And where disappointment, it's going to be met by mercy. And the reason is Jesus is there. And he's the reward. He is the one that we're after. He's the one that makes all things right. He's the one that makes all things new for us. And the thing is, for some of you, this is new information. Because if I told you, hey, this is a real place, you can go to this place, I do wonder, like, how many of you would be willing to change your rhythm? Change the energy that you give to the very public place and give much of that energy to the secret place. Because it shouldn't surprise you, Jesus spent a lot of time in the secret place. He regularly, and I get it, man. We've all got it. We're like, I'm so busy. Listen, nobody's busier than Jesus. Nobody. And regularly, he just withdrew to be with the Father. And it was in that secret place with the Father that he was given authority to conquer the fear of man. It was in that place he was given authority to do signs and wonders. It was in that place he was given authority to preach the gospel of the kingdom. And so it shouldn't surprise us that when we're in that secret place, where we just steal away into that place, where people are like, where'd you go? It's like, well, that's none of your business. That's a secret place. Well, where is it? I can't tell you. Am I invited? No. It's just me and Jesus. It's in that place. It should not surprise you that he fills you with confidence of your sonship and your daughtership. I really believe this, and I'm growing in this area. I'm not here, but I'm growing in this area. I really believe the proportion to which you and I spend in that secret place with him, just being with him, enjoying him, not trying to get anything from him, just being with him. The proportion that you and I are willing to be with him is the proportion of confidence that you will have in the public space. Your time in the private, your time in the secret will give you authority in the public. So there's a lot of benefits to being in that secret place. We don't have time to talk about all of them. You can go to Matthew 6. There's several very clearly listed. But I want to talk about one. When you and I make it our ambition this year to say, I'm just going to be with him. I want to learn from him as a teacher. I want to be directed by him as a prophet. I want to say yes to him as Lord over my life. One of the things that happens, and this is the gift for us, is that our identity is cemented. Our identity is cemented, and this is so helpful for us, and the reason is that we're living in a time, in a culture, where one of its highest virtues is that it tells you get to invent your identity. You get to decide what your identity is, and then you get to go ahead and demand from the entire world that they affirm your identity. Can I just tell you that's a bad idea? I mean, elementary psychology says this is a bad idea. I mean, even Freud back in the 20s and 30s, he says this is a bad idea because he's like, how do you know who's going to show up? Like, which one of you is going to show up to the party? Is it going to be the fully authentic self? Is that who's showing up? Or the next day, is it going to be the ego-driven, emotionally immature self that shows up to the party? Is it going to be the perpetual daddy issue self showing up to the party? Is it going to be the mature, long game kind of self showing up? Like, who's going to show up to the party? And so when we tell people, and I know we do this with good motives, but it's terrible advice, when we say, listen, just follow your heart. That's terrible advice because what we're telling them is, hey, whatever decisions you're making, just make that decision like whatever feels right in the moment. But if you've been an adult longer than 15 minutes, you know, like, you can't build a life on that. You can't build a marriage on that. You can't build purity on that. You can't build a business on that. You certainly can't build a gospel community on that. Let me say this a different way. If we choose an identity, if we decide what our identity is, then we have to perform that identity. And then what's required is about 1,000 points of validation from other people. And then the moment somebody questions your identity, we lose our mind. And what is so profound to me is how gracious our God is, how good and gentle our Father is, because he's like, I'm not interested in you inventing an identity. I just want you to receive one. This is why the cross, the centerpiece of the Christian faith, is so important. And this is why Paul would say, I'm making my ambition to preach nothing but the cross. And the reason is because in the cross, he says this in Galatians 6:14, he says, man, never boast in anything except the cross. How else does it go? Man, never boast in anything except the cross for Lord Jesus Christ, for which I have been crucified to the world and the world to me. And those last two phrases are so important because Paul's like, when I've been crucified to the world, it means I'm not bearing the weight of the pressure of the world. And when I've been crucified, or when the world's been crucified to me, it means I don't have to create an identity for the world. He's like, my identity is found in the cross. And the reason the cross matters is because if you're new to church, when Jesus, the Son of God, goes to the cross, he's not just saying, when it is finished, that I'm forgiving you as sons and daughters. Yes, that is true. It's not just that he destroys the work of the devil. Yes, that is true. It's not just that he secures a place in heaven for us. Yes. But when he says it is finished, he's saying it is finished. You don't have to keep inventing identities and to perform them. You can simply live as a son and daughter of God. If you have children, you can see how this identity works, because your children, they know they're your children. I mean, they walk around the house like they own the joint. And they go into the fridge and they're like, this is my fridge. And if you're a good parent, you're like, yeah, generally. Like, don't go through my drawers, but I mean, like, anything you want. It's like, you're my kid. All the rights and privileges of being a Quitt is yours. And they don't question that. I love how Henry Nouwen says this. If you're learning to read in 2024, I hope you are. And by learning to read, I don't mean like Dick and Jane books. I mean like, if you're reading for Christian formation, and again, I would encourage you to do that. This is 50 years ago, but it's so prophetic. Henry Nouwen says this. This is a long quote, so just bear with me. He says, solitude is the furnace of transformation. Without solitude, we remain victims of our society and continue to be entangled in the illusions of the false self. Jesus himself entered into this furnace. There he was tempted with 3 compulsions of the world: to be relevant, hello, turn stones into loaves; to be spectacular, throw yourself down; and to be powerful, I will give you all the kingdoms. I don't know if there's greater temptations now in 2024 than these 3. And yet he emerged victorious based on his surrender to the commandment. You must worship the Lord your God and serve him alone. Solitude is the place of the great struggle and the great encounter. The struggle against the compulsions of the false self, and the encounter with the loving God who offers himself as the substance of the new self. So when you and I have an encounter with God, and that's what we're talking about today. When you and I have a real-time, in-the-moment experience with the God of the universe, he takes the old self and he just casts it into the sea, and he gives us a new identity. And when moments of hardship, moments of unimaginable circumstance come our way, we drill down deep into our soul, and what we find is not a shaky foundation, but a sure foundation in who he is. Because everything that he is, he's creating in us. A faithfulness, a steadfastness. We're not God. We never will be gods. But we will be fully known as sons and daughters of him. And that identity goes down to the deepest places. And I just wonder, for some of you, you're coming coming in hot this morning. And I do appreciate New Year's because resolutions are not a bad thing. Some of you are coming in and you're like, you know what, we're going to make church a thing. Church is important. Got kids. We want to raise kids in church for all sorts of reasons. And those are good motives. But I want to invite you to drill down your motives a little bit. And I want you to begin to hold on to this reality that God actually wants. He doesn't just want to be part of your life. He wants to be your life. And he wants to transform your entire life into a son and daughter, a confidence and an affirmation that you're known, that you're loved by God. There's nothing that you can do to escape his love. There's nothing that you can do to outrun his love. And when you and I have an encounter with him and we say yes to him, there is a tidal wave of grace that overtakes us.